Right now, without thinking about it, clench your teeth just slightly. Hold that for 2 seconds. Feel where the tension goes. It doesn't stay in your jaw. It moves up into your temples, down into your neck, and if you hold it long enough, it pulls across your shoulders and tightens the base of your skull. You just felt something that most people feel every waking hour without realizing they're feeling it, because it's their baseline. Because it's all they've ever known. And here's what nobody told you. That small muscular grip in your jaw. That almost invisible clenching you probably weren't even aware you were doing 5 minutes ago. That is not a dental problem. It is a whole body signal. A neurological switch that your nervous system uses to decide whether you are safe or in danger, and it is running in the background of every conversation you have, every decision you make, and every night of sleep you think you're getting, but aren't fully recovering from. If this is already resonating with something you've felt in your body but couldn't name before, stick with this. And if you've never thought about your jaw as anything more than something you chew with, what you're about to understand is going to change how you think about tension, stress, and your nervous system entirely. Let's start from the beginning, because to understand why the jaw holds this kind of power over the entire body, you need to understand something about how your nervous system is actually structured. Your body runs on 2 parallel operating systems. The first is the somatic nervous system, which handles voluntary movement, the things you consciously decide to do. The second is the autonomic nervous system, which runs everything you don't consciously control. Your heart rate, your digestion, your immune response, your breathing rhythm, your level of muscular tension throughout your entire body. And the autonomic nervous system has 2 primary modes. The first is the sympathetic mode, which most people know as fight or flight. The second is the parasympathetic mode, which is sometimes called rest and digest, the state where your body repairs itself, recovers and functions with the least amount of internal friction. The single most important to understand about these 2 modes is that your body is not designed to run both at the same time at full capacity. When sympathetic activation is high, parasympathetic recovery is suppressed. And this is where the jaw comes in, because the jaw is one of the primary physical signals your brain uses to determine which mode your nervous system should be operating in. This is not a metaphor. This is not a wellness concept. This is a documented neurological relationship that is built into the architecture of your brain, and once you understand the mechanism, you will never look at tension in your body the same way again. The trigeminal nerve is the largest sensory nerve in your entire head. It has 3 branches, one that runs to your forehead and scalp, one that runs through your cheeks and the area around your nose, and one that runs directly into your jaw and lower face. That third branch, the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve, carries sensory information from your jaw muscles directly to your brainstem, specifically to a cluster of nuclei that sit at the crossroads between your sensory processing centers and your autonomic control systems. What this means in practical terms is that the tension state of your jaw muscles is being continuously reported to the part of your brain that decides how activated your nervous system should be. A clenched jaw sends a signal upward that reads as threat. A relaxed jaw sends a signal upward that reads as safety. Your brainstem is receiving this information constantly, and it is adjusting your entire body's baseline tension in response. The masseter is the primary muscle of the jaw. It is by weight relative to its size, one of the strongest muscles in the human body. It runs from your cheekbone down to your lower jawbone, and its job is to generate the force needed for chewing. A healthy adult can generate between 70 and 150 pounds of force per square inch when biting down hard. The masseter is built for this. It is a powerful, dense, deeply innervated muscle, and because it is so deeply innervated, because it has so many nerve connections running through it, and around it, it has an outsized influence on the surrounding tissue and on the nervous system signals traveling through that region. When the masseter is chronically contracted, even slightly, even at a level you would not consciously register as clenching, it creates a cascade of effects that move through the body in both directions. Moving upward, the tension travels through the temporal fascia, which is the connective tissue covering the temporalis muscle on the side of your skull. This is why chronic jaw tension almost always coexists with tension headaches. The headache is not starting in your head. It is starting in your jaw and migrating upward through the fascial system. Moving downward, the masseter connects to the muscles of the neck through a web of fascia and shared muscular attachments. The sternocleidomastoid, which runs from behind your ear down to your collarbone, is directly influenced by jaw tension. The suboccipital muscles, which sit at the base of your skull and control the precise positioning of your head on your spine, are part of the same tensional chain. Chronic activation in the jaw creates chronic activation in these muscles, which creates a forward head posture in many people, pulling the cervical spine out of its neutral alignment. And here is where the cascade becomes something that most people never connect to the jaw. A forward head posture compresses the structures in the front of the neck, reduces the mobility of the thoracic spine, restricts rib expansion, and limits the full depth of the breathing cycle. Shallow breathing is a physiological input that keeps the sympathetic nervous system activated. Your brainstem monitors your breathing pattern as one of its primary data inputs for assessing safety. Short, shallow breaths mean threat. Long, slow, full breaths mean safety. Your jaw tension is, through this chain, directly contributing to the breathing pattern that keeps your nervous system in a low-level state of alert. You are clenching your jaw, restricting your neck, shallowing your breath, and sending constant sympathetic signals upward. And you are doing all of this without knowing it, because the whole chain runs below the threshold of conscious awareness. There is a direction to the relationship between the jaw and stress that most people assume works only one way. They think stress causes jaw clenching, and that is true. When your sympathetic nervous system activates under stress, the masseter and the other muscles of mastication are among the first muscles to respond with increased baseline tension. This is part of the ancient threat response. An animal preparing to bite, to fight, to hold on, clamps its jaw. Humans carry that same reflex, and emotional stress, cognitive stress, environmental threat, social anxiety. All of these activate the same physiological pathway and result in jaw tension. But the relationship does not stop there. Because what research into the trigeminal system and autonomic regulation has shown is that the signal runs in both directions. Jaw tension creates sympathetic activation just as reliably as sympathetic activation creates jaw tension. This is what makes the jaw a master switch rather than just a symptom. It is not merely reflecting the state of your nervous system, it is actively participating in maintaining that state. Research published in journals studying the relationship between temporomandibular dysfunction and autonomic nervous system balance has consistently found that patients with chronic jaw tension show measurably elevated in sympathetic tone, elevated resting heart rate variability in the direction of sympathetic dominance, and altered cortisol rhythms compared to control groups. The jaw is not waiting passively while stress happens around it. It is one of the mechanisms by which stress perpetuates itself in the body, hour after hour, day after day, in people who have no idea this loop is running. If what you're reading here is making you want to go deeper on how your nervous system works and how to work with it rather than against it, that is exactly what this channel focuses on. The psychology and biology of how your body and mind actually function, explained in a way that gives you real tools. Subscribing means more of this kind of content comes to you directly. One of the most significant places this entire dynamic plays out is at night, and most people have no idea it's happening because they're asleep when it occurs. Bruxism is the clinical term for the clenching and grinding of teeth during sleep. Estimates vary, but research suggests that somewhere between 8 and 31% of the adult population engages in sleep bruxism at some level, with many cases going undiagnosed for years until the dentist notices worn enamel or a partner mentions the grinding sound. But sleep bruxism is not simply a dental problem to be managed with a mouthguard. It is a window into the state of the nervous system during what should be the body's primary recovery period. Sleep is when your body runs its repair processes, consolidates memory, clears metabolic waste from the brain through the glymphatic system, and restores the hormonal balance that stress has disrupted during the day. The quality of this recovery depends heavily on whether the autonomic nervous system shifts adequately into parasympathetic dominance during sleep, and chronic jaw tension disrupts this shift. Studies examining the relationship between bruxism and sleep architecture have found that bruxism episodes are most frequent during the lighter stages of sleep and during transitions between sleep stages, and that these episodes are associated with brief microarousals that the sleeper does not consciously register, but that interrupt the depth of recovery. People with high rates of nocturnal clenching spend more time in lighter, less restorative sleep stages without knowing it. They wake up and describe feeling unrested, feeling like sleep didn't do what it was supposed to do, and they attribute it to stress or a bad mattress or getting older, when part of what is happening is that their jaw has been running the sympathetic nervous system through the night, interrupting the very recovery that stress requires. The vagus nerve is the primary driver of parasympathetic activation. It is the longest cranial nerve in the body, running from your brainstem down through your neck, past your heart, through your diaphragm, and into your abdominal organs. Its activity is the single largest determinant of how deeply your body can enter parasympathetic rest. And the vagus nerve travels through the neck in close proximity to the muscular and fascial structures that are directly connected to jaw tension. Chronic tension in the suboccipital muscles and the deep cervical fascia, both of which are influenced by the jaw chain we described earlier, can mechanically compress or alter the signaling environment around the vagus nerve. This is an area of active research, and the mechanisms are still being characterized, but the clinical observation is consistent. People who release chronic jaw and neck tension report improvements in sleep quality, in heart rate variability, and in their capacity for calm, at a rate that is striking enough to have become a recognized observation in somatic therapy, bodywork, and nervous system rehabilitation contexts. There is a dimension to jaw tension that goes beyond mechanics and neurology, and it is the one that tends to land most personally when people encounter it for the first time. The body stores emotional experience not just as memory in the brain, but as physical patterning in the muscular and fascial systems. This is not a fringe idea. It is a well-documented phenomenon that has been studied through multiple frameworks, from Peter Levine's work on somatic experiencing and trauma, to Bessel van der Kolk's research detailed in his landmark book on the body and trauma, to the neuroscience of how the amygdala encodes threat responses and how those responses get expressed through the autonomic nervous system and the muscles it governs. The jaw is one of the primary sites where unexpressed emotion accumulates in the body. Think about what the jaw represents behaviorally. It is the structure you clench when you hold something back. It is the place where the impulse to speak gets physically suppressed. When someone is in an argument and choosing not to say what they really want to say, the jaw tightens. When someone receives news that frightens them and they are trying not to show it, the jaw tightens. When someone is sitting in a meeting feeling the pressure of expectations and the effort of performing calm, the jaw tightens. Over time, these individual tension events, each one temporary in intention, accumulate into a chronic background level of muscular holding that the nervous system begins to treat as normal. The jaw stops being something that occasionally tenses and relaxes, and becomes something that is always slightly held, always slightly braced, always carrying a low level of stored readiness that the person has long since stopped noticing because it simply feels like how they are, and because the jaw is connected through the trigeminal system to the brainstem, and through the brainstem to the emotional processing centers of the limbic system. The chronic tension in the jaw is not just a physical echo of past emotion. It is an ongoing physical input that the brain uses to model the current emotional state. Your brain looks at the tension pattern in your body and uses it as one of the primary data sources for determining how you feel. A chronically held jaw contributes to a chronic low level of emotional vigilance, of the sense that something needs to be managed or held together, even when the external situation does not warrant it. Understanding the problem is only useful if it opens a path to something different. So let's talk about what actually happens in the body and the nervous system when the jaw genuinely releases. A true jaw release is not the same as temporarily dropping the lower jaw or consciously unclenching for a moment while continuing to hold tension in the surrounding muscles. A genuine jaw release involves a softening of the masseter, a widening sensation in the back of the jaw joint, and a dropping of the tongue from the roof of the mouth to a resting position. When this happens, something shifts. The trigeminal nerve input to the brainstem changes character. The signal that has been reading as mild chronic threat begins reading as safety. The autonomic nervous system responds by allowing the parasympathetic branch to increase its influence. Breathing tends to deepen automatically. The muscles at the base of the skull soften slightly. The neck loses some of its background tension. Heart rate slows fractionally. This is not a dramatic event. It does not feel like a rush or a release in the way that crying or laughing, or taking a long breath after holding it feels. It feels like a subtraction, like something that was quietly consuming energy stops consuming it. And that sensation of subtraction, of quiet, of something that was running in the background going offline, is deeply unfamiliar for most people, because the tension has been present so consistently for so long that the absence of it feels almost strange. Research on relaxation training, biofeedback for Bruxism, and somatic approaches to autonomic regulation consistently finds that jaw and facial muscle release has a measurable effect on the broader tension state of the body that is disproportionate to the size of the muscles involved. The jaw is small relative to the quadriceps or the erector spinae, but its influence on the nervous system is larger than its size would suggest because of its direct relationship to the trigeminal brainstem pathway and through that to the autonomic system's calibration. Working with the jaw is not a peripheral relaxation technique. It is working at one of the actual hinge points of the nervous system's threat and safety evaluation. So what does working with the jaw actually look like in practice? And how do you begin to change a pattern that has been running for years without your awareness? The first step, and this is not a trivial step even though it sounds simple, is developing the capacity to notice the jaw's tension state in real time. Most people cannot tell you what their jaw is doing right now. They have not developed the internal sensory awareness to detect the difference between a clenched jaw and a released jaw, because the clenching is so habitual and so constant that it has become invisible. Start by checking in with your jaw 3 or 4 times a day, at moments of transition, when you sit down at your desk, when you stop at a red light, when you pick up your phone, when you lie down at night. Not to fix anything in those first days, just to observe. Is the jaw held? Is the tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth? Are the teeth touching when they shouldn't be? Teeth should not be touching when you are not actively chewing or speaking. The resting position of the jaw should have a small space between the upper and lower teeth. If yours are touching, that is tension you are carrying continuously. The second step is learning what release actually feels like in your specific body, a technique that reliably induces a genuine jaw release for most people. Involves letting the lower jaw drop slightly, placing the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth just behind the upper front teeth, and then actively softening the back corners of the jaw, the area just in front of and below the ears, while taking 3 slow, slightly extended exhales. The combination of the jaw position, the tongue placement, and the extended exhale activates the parasympathetic response through multiple channels simultaneously. The extended exhale specifically increases vagal tone, which is the measure of parasympathetic activity. Doing this does not require stillness or silence or a particular environment. It can be done in a meeting, in a conversation, standing in a grocery store line. It takes less than 60 seconds, and its effect on the nervous system is immediate and measurable if you are paying attention. The third step is addressing the fascial and muscular components that hold the chronic tension pattern in place, because awareness and breath work can interrupt the pattern in the moment, but they cannot by themselves change the structural holding that has built up in the masseter and the surrounding tissue over months and years. Self-massage of the masseter, applying gentle sustained pressure to the muscle belly while maintaining slow breathing, begins to change the resting tone of the muscle over time. This is not painful pressure. It is the kind of sustained, patient contact that communicates safety to the nervous system rather than stimulating a defensive response. Practitioners of craniosacral therapy, somatic experiencing, and certain forms of bodywork have documented that releasing the jaw and surrounding structures frequently produces systemic shifts in nervous system tone that patients describe as profound, not because the jaw is magic, but because it sits at a neurological pivot point that most of us have never consciously worked with before. Here is what all of this comes down to. You are living inside a nervous system that is doing its best to keep you safe using the tools evolution gave it. One of those tools is the jaw, a muscular, heavily innervated structure that reports directly to your brainstem and contributes in real time to your body's assessment of whether you are in danger or at rest. When life is consistently demanding, when the cognitive load is high, when the emotional pressure is ongoing, the jaw learns to hold. It becomes the body's default bracing posture, the physical expression of a nervous system that is trying to stay ready, stay controlled, stay prepared. And it does this quietly, below the threshold of your awareness, for years, sometimes for decades. The costs of this holding are not dramatic. They are gradual. They show up as chronic tension headaches that you have just accepted as part of your life. They show up as a quality of sleep that never quite feels complete. They show up as a low level of vigilance that makes it hard to fully relax, even when the circumstances of your life genuinely warrant rest. They show up as a baseline emotional tone that tilts slightly toward bracing rather than ease. None of these feel like a jaw problem. None of them would make you think, I should pay attention to what my jaw is doing, but they are, in significant part, a jaw problem. And the remarkable thing, the genuinely extraordinary thing about this particular system is how quickly it responds when you begin to work with it consciously. The nervous system is not rigid. It does not require months of effort to begin shifting. It requires accurate information about what is happening, consistent, gentle input in the direction of safety, and the patience to notice changes that feel like subtraction rather than addition. Your jaw has been the master switch for your body's tension for your entire adult life. You just didn't know you could reach it. If something in this changed how you understand what your body's been carrying, that is exactly the kind of shift this content is built to create. Every video on this channel goes this deep into the psychology and biology of how you actually function, not in theory, not in general terms, but in the specific mechanisms that determine how you think and how you recover. If you want more of that, the subscribe button, how you fee, how you will not, is right there. And it means the next time we go this deep into something, you will not miss it.